If you've never heard of it, Friesland is a province of the Netherlands located in the northernmost part of the country. In the year 1100, a gentleman named Emo von Wittrium did something no one had ever done before. He left his homeland to attend college in a foreign country. And in his case, it was Oxford University in England. Flash forward to 1835. John Diamatari from the island nation of Greece made waves as the first ever known international student to make his way to an American college. That was the University of Georgia. And whether he knew it or not, John paved the way for millions who have come to this country on a journey that many teens and young adults, in retrospect, describe as transformative. But what about the future? Who is paving the way for a high schooler or undergraduate born and bred perhaps outside of the United States, but yearning to embark on a collegiate odyssey and come to the States? If you are one of them and you are feeling ill at ease, ill prepared for this journey, and you're waiting for everything to be perfect, I've got the guest for you. And our guest today heeds this advice, which I'm going to ask you to consider in 3 parts. Number 1, what she says to you: you will never be able to learn everything needed to survive after you arrive in the United States. Number 2, the preparation you undertake will never be offset by the cultural shocks you are about to face. In fact, it will prepare you. And number 3, this is my favorite and near and dear to my heart. Average is that small temptation stopping you from doing what you should. Genius is that little badass stopping you from becoming average. Invoke that badass. Go on and get educated. Our guest today is Soundarya Balasubramani. And while she came to the United States to get more educated, what she achieved in a few years is extraordinary. And if for no other reason, at such a young age, she continues to transform herself from being the student to now becoming the teacher, and further igniting a movement she so powerfully writes about in her wonderful book called Admitted. And to continue in her world of endless possibilities, she has launched into online education, where she inspires you not to fill your mind, but to empty it, to reach an emotional state in which your head is clear, unencumbered, and focused. She is wholly dedicated to teach you how to develop a mind like water. While she studied chemical engineering in college in India, she did her master's at Columbia University School of Engineering, where I so proudly teach. And while working on her day job as a product manager at Salesforce in the Bay Area, she spends, I think, every other waking moment in the service of your success. I am proud to call her my friend, and I am honored that she is joining us today. Soundarya, welcome to A Climb to the Top.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful, and I cannot tell you how much it means for me to be here.
Likewise, it's wonderful. Soundarya, the hardest part about prepping for this episode with you is determining what to leave out, because there is so much information that you conveyed in your book called Admitted, which I will say I loved. Now, that book was not written for me. I already live here and I'm educated here and I teach here. But when I read the book, I said, this is a different kind of book. What I loved about your book, and I'd like you to paint the scene for us, is your arrival in New York. And even though you may have been all excited, oh my God, I'm going to Columbia, I'm going to New York, you showed vulnerability and you showed an incredible courage by narrating a story that I think is different than other people's expectations of what they think will happen when they come to New York. So before we get into any of this, help us understand what your first experience was when you arrived in this country, or you arrived in New York.
Absolutely. I have recounted the story and told this many times, so it's very vivid in my memory right now. And I've also written about this in my book, actually.
And I felt it.
You felt it. I had no idea that my first day was going to be the way it was, the way it ended up being. I thought I would reach America, and the first day I would sleep in the entire day because I had just finished a 25 to 30 hour long journey across the world. And somehow on the flight, I got sick. Or I think I began getting sick right before I boarded the flight, and then it exacerbated during the journey because it was 25 to 30 hours of sitting in one location. And I remember getting off the flight. I had two friends with me at that point, and we were not going to be living in the same house though. So we said our goodbyes at the airport, and I had two very heavy luggages filled with clothes and food, a lot of food from India. And I took a cab to get to the address, to get to the home that I had only since then seen in pictures. And I had also not met my roommates. I had met them through WhatsApp in the months preceding when we had a WhatsApp group and we just spontaneously met people on these platforms. And so I went there at about 10 a.m. and I met them for the first time in real life. Um, and they were just leaving the house to spend the entire day in the city, visiting all of the touristy places that one would visit when they go to New York. And I didn't want to say no. I felt this just a slight peer pressure of, well, I'm here and they're leaving and I should probably go with them. So I had a very quick breakfast of whatever was there at that point. And I was already very fatigued and sick at this point, but I still went, which in hindsight, I think I should not have. And I spent the entire day, not just with them, but also with a group of 15 other people who, once again, I'd met for the first time in my life. And being an introvert, it, it's it's just not easy meeting a group of 15 new people in one day and also spending time with all of them. And funnily enough, I had actually spoken to almost all of these people via WhatsApp in the months preceding, but meeting them in person was such an anxiety inducing experience for me. I didn't know how to make small talk. I didn't know how to keep the conversation going. And I remember I was standing at some pier in New York next to the water, and I was just walking by myself for a while because I was feeling tired and nervous and just didn't know how to mix with the group at that point. So at around 10 p.m., we were in Times Square, and they were still going and seeing places around New York. But I was so exhausted, I just wanted to get home by myself. So I made the decision of taking the subway, which even today is confusing to me. But back then it was a labyrinth. I had no idea how to navigate
It
it.
still is.
But I took the subway by myself and I went to the wrong destination. I got dropped off at Harlem, somewhere at 125th Street in Harlem. And I got out and I had no idea how to get home. And it's just a lot of small things happened, which became a snowball effect of a bad experience that day. It was very cold. I didn't have a jacket on me. My phone was dead, so I couldn't call people or navigate home. So I just knew my address. Thankfully, New York is all grids and blocks. So I went in the direction of my house. I began running, and I do remember tears streaming down my face at that point because I was so scared that someone would mug me, since I all I heard about Harlem was that it is extremely unsafe and absolutely do not go there at night by yourself as a
And there
woman.
you were.
And there I was. Um, and I remember running, getting to my house. I think most of the things that I've said so far, I'm just recounting the story, but the next thing I'm about to say is the one that I remember most vividly. I can still feel it. I remember getting to the basement where I was living. It was in a basement of a small apartment, and I just cried for the next 2 to 3 hours. I could not stop myself. And thankfully, no one else was home at that point. So I was just crying so hard, badly about how I came to this unfamiliar country, being so excited and wanting to meet all these people, but I met them and I could not really mingle with them. And I just felt this wave of unfamiliarity, and I was missing my home and friends and family back in India intensely in those 2 hours. So that was my first day. now it's a good story.
Yes, yet this was your indoctrination. And I think this is where I want to start talking about the book. You were a chemical engineering student in India. At what point did you set your sights on either coming to America or just studying abroad? When and how did that possibility manifest itself?
Yeah, so I hear two questions there. One is,
Mhm.
when did you even think of
Yep,
wanting to study in the US? And
yep.
secondly, how did you go from chemical engineering to master's in management?
Let's take the first one
And I
because I
think,
think that's thematic to
yeah.
the book. You now had to form in your mind,
Mm.
if is my future in India? Is my future, it could have been in the UK or Australia. Walk us through, for those who are listening, who may be where you were several years ago, help us understand what that was like.
Yeah, absolutely. I was first introduced to the idea of even going to the United States thanks to a scholarship that I got in my junior year, so third year of college.
Mhm.
It's called the S.N.Bose Scholarship. It's a very reputed scholarship which picks, I believe, about 40 students from India every year. And then um, it pays for your airfare, they pay for your accommodation, and they even give you a stipend on top of all of that. And they give you this bridge that you need to go from your home country into a new country and experience what it feels like to study and conduct research there.
Right,
And so it was a very safe bridge for me because, as you can imagine, they took care of everything.
right.
They did a fantastic job. All I had to do was, well, I had to apply and get in. So fortunately, I got in. And summer of 2016, I stepped into the United States for the first time on, I believe, May 19th.
Mhm.
Um, and I had such a blissful summer. I was at University of Wisconsin-Madison in Wisconsin, and I think I had such a blissful summer in hindsight because even though I was in a new country and not yet acclimated to the new environment and I was facing culture shocks, I still had this bubble of comfort around me because it was not just me. I had 9 other scholars. So all 10 of us were living in the same building, an apartment,
Right.
where we all had our own rooms with all of the amenities that you would need. And we all met each other on a daily basis and we cooked together. So it felt like I still had that bubble of comfort around me of people I knew from India, and the etiquettes and traditions that we follow in India were still taken and then put in this new country.
Right.
So I had the best of both worlds. And that was my first introduction to what it would even feel like to be in a different country.
Yet you come to New York now in your graduate world and you're excited. You're admitted to Columbia University, wonderful institution. You're dropped in the middle of New York and you're crying for 3 hours. It was a different experience than what you had at the University of Wisconsin. And I appreciate that you put that in your book because this book was more than just a how to be admitted and what is the process by which. This was a story of your continual series of adjustments to feel at home in what felt like a very strange place. Is that what you were going for in the book?
You put it so articulately there. Absolutely. I began writing a how to guide, but I really feel like Admitted was a series of Lego blocks that kept adding on almost on a weekly basis. So in the beginning, we imagined building a small shack with a few Lego blocks. But in the end, it just became this skyscraper. But it took 9 months of intense effort by not just me, but 7 other people as well.
Right.
But in the beginning, all I wanted to create with my junior Sai was a short how-to guide, no stories, just a how-to guide telling people follow these steps.
And
But some
Sundarya, were you writing something that otherwise did not exist?
um, in the beginning, I would say no, because there were a few guides that you could follow.
Mhm.
Um, However, I would say that there is absolutely no other book like Admitted that I have found so far, even right now in the market. And because as you can imagine, you said it yourself, it's not just a checklist of do this, this, this. It's a checklist, but it's almost weaved into this bigger story of what does it really feel like to leave everything you know that is familiar to you and go to a new country. And in hindsight, what are the lessons or mistakes you can avoid that I made during my journey?
Right.
And also, we added more elements onto this by using the virtue of graphic design, because I worked with two graphic designers, and we added. I'm a huge nerd when it comes to neuroscience, psychology, and history. So I added
And that
these
was on
mental
display in
models.
the book, and I loved it. It was one of my favorite parts. Beyond, I feel I got to know you better. You made so many references that I thought were excellent adjacencies to the point of this is not just about admission to college. This is a life story. That one of the things that I loved about it, you stated that there was a quote from a scientist that said, change your perspective and you gain 80 IQ points. What you had throughout the book was a varying expertise, say different varying levels of expertise in various areas that supported your thesis of why one would want to leave the States in the first place. Was that conscious that this was an important element to support the book?
I think the very first chapter, if you notice, says, should you even study abroad?
Right.
Which I thought was critical, because most people, the reason they do it, I believe in hindsight, having done it myself and seeing hundreds of people do it, I wanted to almost warn them that, hey, if this is the reason you're doing it, maybe just pause and think one more time.
Right.
Because if you're doing it just to earn more money, and I'm not saying that is a wrong goal at all, there is no right or wrong here.
Right.
However, you should know that if you're doing it just for the sake of money, you're not thinking about 10 other places where you're you have an opportunity cost for everything that you're saying yes to. You're saying no to all of these other things, and you might not get what you want if your goal is just making money. So I did want to introduce a few reasons why I've heard people want to study abroad, and why those are not the reasons that you should be doing it for if you want to get the best experience out of this. um, I'm sorry if that is that what your question
Yeah,
was. I felt
let's
like
go
I
with
went
that,
on a
because what
tangent
I
there.
like about it, it begs the question, before we get even to the heart of the book, is everyone in your position had to ask and answer a really important question. Why would I leave? And you stated that very early on and later in the book. Why would I leave my friends and families and the memories? But you stated in the end of the book, there is a place to leave that behind, but you've got to be comfortable with answering the question. So for you, why did you study abroad? What was your why?
I think the only way I can answer this is to be completely honest.
Yeah, of course.
um, I know my why. I don't think that would be my why if I did it again, though.
Mhm.
So
Well, good.
the reason I did it was because of it. It was a mix of wanting to just curiosity and gaining more social status,
Right.
and also, since I experienced what it feels like to be in a new country through the scholarship, I also realized, oh, this is a great learning opportunity. Um, but I also knew that there was a big element of social status there, because having grown up in India, where I grew up, um, in that kind of society that I grew up in, there was a lot of emphasis placed on outcomes and results and awards and scholarships.
Yep.
So I was extremely focused on that throughout my school and college years.
Right.
And right now, I think differently, but truth be told, I was very focused on that, to the point where it was not healthy. However, it got me to the US. And so, even though the reason I came here, I don't agree with right now, but I understand why I did that. I'm just so grateful to my younger self for doing it, because it has given me so much more in ways that I could not have even anticipated back then. I didn't even have the vocabulary for this, and I chose that.
Well, in retrospect, then, for those who are considering coming to Columbia or Harvard, I appreciate there is a status to be gained in addition to the knowledge. But your transformation, Sundarya, seemed to have transcended, so to speak, that what does yourself today who looks back, what's your why today?
My why today. Who is this author? I'm trying to recollect. I believe it's Robbie Williams. I'm forgetting the name, but a very famous author said this quote in one of his books where he says, "The goal of your life is to gather experiences
Mhm.
and change perspectives and constantly search for ways you can look at the same thing with a new lens." And I believe that's what studying abroad gives you. It gives it to you on a daily basis. So since I've come here, I had to unlearn so many things that I learned when I was growing up at a very formative age, and I'm absolutely loving it. It's not easy, it's not comfortable, because it's almost as if you have to unlearn how to tie a shoelace, something that you've been told how to do since you were young. How do you unlearn that? It's so incredibly hard, but it's very rewarding because it just expands your mind and the possibilities of what's possible at every moment. And so that's the main um, gift that I received since I come to the US, is to look at the same thing but in 10 different ways, not in a very rigid way that I've been taught since I was young. And secondly, it made me more humble. Coming here, seeing people who were so much smarter than me in certain aspects. Um, I remember I would spend 6 hours on the same math problem that would take a student from France, for example, 30 minutes. And it just makes you more humble because having I was the gold medalist in my undergrad. So, and I definitely think that it made me complacent, and it made me feel in some way that, oh, I am pretty smart here. But coming to the US, it grounded me
Right.
much more than I
Well,
thought it would.
it sound like, well, let me address one thing. Give us some examples of those things now that you felt you needed to unlearn. I think this is going to be very good advice for anyone in India who may be listening to this considering coming. What do you recommend they unlearn?
The first thing I would, in fact, I had a call with someone who spoke to me recently, and she really felt like a younger version of me. So
Right.
it was a very um, emotional experience for me to talk to someone like that. It
Mhm.
felt like I was talking to myself. And what I told her, and that's what I wanted to tell here, was there is no one else you need to compare yourself with as you're going through your life. And unfortunately, we are grown up with exactly the opposite in school, in college, in every phase of your life, because you're constantly being compared against the person next to you in the form of a bell curve, in the form of grades, in the form of who gets, because there are limited spots for the scholarship, who gets it and who doesn't. It feels like life is a zero sum game when you're in this bubble of constant comparison. But since I've graduated, I've realized more and more that the only person I should be comparing myself with is just myself yesterday. That's all. And if I learned something new today which I didn't know yesterday, then I'm grateful for that today. And it's I'm sure that people keep hearing this lesson from other people as well. It's not a new insight, but I do think there is an inflection point when you keep hearing it, and then you actually start believing it and acting like it. There is an inflection point that I've seen in myself happen over the past year.
Well, you spoke in the book that one of the things that you felt you needed to do, and I'll put it in the way that you expressed it, shutting out the voices around you as you learn to say no. There's two parts to that. What you're describing is shutting out the voices who are telling you their definition of smart. It sounds to me like you have, over the course of these couple of years, figured out and redefined what it means to be smart, even though it is contrary to the conventions by whence you came. Is that a fair conclusion?
100%. I would. even add on one more layer to say that it's not even the definition of smart as much as the definition of success.
Right. Right. And what does it mean to say no? Who are you saying no, or who is yourself 4 years ago, or the person you just described who was a younger version of you? What no's are they supposed to say?
Um, the first big no, the loud no that I remember saying myself was going away from chemical engineering and pursuing management.
Mhm.
Because up until then, I was so sure that I would be doing not just a master's, but a doctorate, a
Right.
PhD in
Yep.
energy engineering, which is where I spent some time researching in those 3 years.
Mhm.
But thankfully, I came to the US. I got to see other scholars around me. And I think that was my first reference point for this is how you're supposed to feel like if you're going to do a doctorate degree in something. You're supposed to feel this amount of passion for what you're doing.
Right.
And I did not feel that. I
Right.
felt passion for other things which were outside a research lab. I felt passion for the organizations that I'd built and led in my undergrad. I felt much more passion for working with people on these small ideas that then become big later on. So, anyways, it took 4 months to really go from thinking about let's do a PhD in energy engineering because that's what my profile says I should do
Right.
versus no, I'm going to do a completely different degree. And even if my parents don't agree with it, even if the people around me think it's wrong, it's not the right choice, even if I myself think that this is a foolish choice, I still want to do it because I think I could be extraordinary here and I would just be average here.
Well, it was interesting. The way I picked it up on the book was almost in those moments of self reflection. Am I chasing the wrong dream? Or is there another path that I should now change the way I think about those possibilities? Because that's what it sounds once you had the courage to admit, and let's use that word, beyond being admitted to Columbia University, you had to admit to yourself, I don't want to go do that thing that other expectations have been heaped on me. You don't want to be crushed under the weight of those expectations, but now you're the captain. Now you're deciding what's going to be that mountain. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I love the wordplay on the word admit. Amazing. I should really thank,
There's a lot of ways to play this word.
I know, I want to thank, I just want to do a shout out to Sai,
Of
who came up
course.
with the word admitted. It was not even me who termed the book.
Yeah.
So going back to what you were saying, I have vocabulary for the reason why I chose to do management now. It's the Ikigai. It's the,
Yeah.
I'm sure you know about this, but
And I do.
for
In fact, I
anyone,
loved it in the book. Let's describe it. Let's describe the circles and the Japanese concept of reason for being.
absolutely. Ikigai is Japanese for, roughly speaking, the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was found that Japan, or a specific city in Japan, had the most centennials, people who lived over 100 years.
Right.
And all of them had this thread in common, which was this Ikigai. And essentially, Ikigai says that there are four circles in your life. There is what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for. So the sweet spot that everyone should really hope for is to be in that center of, if can you find something that'll give you all four of them, which will then hopefully lead to the state of flow and give you meaning in life. So now I realize that if I had pursued a PhD in chemical engineering, I would have gone for what, perhaps what I was good at and what the world needed, but not what I loved. I don't know about what I can get paid for. That's a longer question, but it was certainly not what I loved. And I guess back then I didn't know about this framework,
Right.
so it was more of an instinctual, like, gut feeling decision.
Well, I have to say, when I bring Ikigai to many of my students, Sandaria, you were my student, but I don't remember bringing it into your class. But when I do, these light bulbs go off saying, oh my God, no one ever bothered to put this in front of me. I never gave this thought. I'm only told to get a 4.0. And if I get a 4.0, that's my path to prosperity. But for me to think about what's my passion, What do I like? What am I good at? What's going to get me paid? What's going to get me paid? People are keyed in on, but they forget the other three things along the way. So thank you for bringing Ikigai into your book. It was beautiful. But there was one other thing that followed Ikigai. I would like you, and I love the way your historical reference of the French of a chef that has to put things in place. So before we get to that, as you were contemplating your transformation and you were now on your chosen path, not somebody else's, describe the concept of mise en place, I guess, and I'm speaking in the Spanish terms, mise en place, but in French, putting things in place. What did that mean to you and what had to be put in place?
Yes, I don't remember how I came across. I believe it's mise en place.
Yeah, I
I'm so
think
sorry
so.
if I'm butchering it to
Yeah,
anyone
me
who's
too.
French.
Right.
Mise en place. Essentially, it means put in place, and it was, I forget the name of the person. Maybe you can recollect my memory, but there was this person who used to work in the military in France,
Right.
who then became the head chef at a restaurant,
Yeah.
and he began to, not surprisingly, bring elements of what he learned at the military inside his restaurant, inside his kitchen. And one of the elements was first to prepare the ingredients of what you're about to cook
Mhm.
and keep them in the most optimized place so that when you're cooking, you're focused on cooking and not trying to find the ingredients or create them from scratch. So this was a very effective strategy that he introduced, which then spread across to the rest of the globe.
Right.
And right now, essentially what it boils down to is just once again, it's a new framework of looking at things. You can apply it to anything. So I had this thought when I was writing, I believe chapter 3 or after chapter 3. Chapter 3 is about shortlisting universities. So I was thinking, well, so far I've spoken about should someone even study abroad, how to help them make the decision, how to help them choose the major and shortlist universities. The next step really is to start preparing the application. But what would be a great transition to go from this phase of researching and searching to the phase of starting to prepare the ingredients? And that's why I thought, well, this is a very interesting metaphor. And I think it'll, people will grasp the concept better if I gave this metaphor. So I told people, or my readers, to think of their applications as the ingredients that they should think about first preparing before they start hitting that submit button and sending it across to universities.
Right. So rather than this tactical thing, let's apply to the best brand, the highest status, the most competitive. In the book, you began to whittle away at that. And I got the sense that
Mm.
the best place may not be what the rest of the world says is the best university. The best place is where you feel the best. And that was my takeaway. It wasn't the brand consciousness, you have to get into Columbia or bust. It was you presented instead of coming, Soundarya, what I read from the mind, you were helping provoke people to think differently about thinking from the heart. And while we never want to dismiss the power of the mind, the heart wins 90% of the time. It's our, the best school is where you feel the best. The best company is where you feel the best. That was my greatest takeaway in your book, because I've dealt with so many, particularly different educational conventions about what's important. You really helped provoke to your to the future that you wrote this book for. You don't have to succumb to that because everyone else says that's right. So let's get into that. Who did you write Admitted for?
Oh, that's such a hard question. Um, when you were saying it so articulately, I had this thought in my head that
Yeah,
this is another instance where you're saying no. And
right.
here, I don't know who you're saying no to, but essentially you are telling no to this tradition that was established that you should look at the top 50 universities in QS rankings or Times Higher Education and then apply to those. So essentially, it's not easy to get people to change their thinking there because I thought that way. I chose Columbia because it was on the list of some top 20 universities somewhere. And so it would be so hypocritical if I didn't acknowledge that first myself.
Right.
So I acknowledged that and I told them that I did this. However, I can say from experience that it's really the way they rank universities that's the problem. When these different ranking sites rank universities, they look at a university as a homogeneous entity,
Right.
and they do a thorough job of whatever they're trying to do, which is look at the number of research papers published and the pedigree of the faculties and the pedigree of students and so on. However, it's done in a very homogeneous way. It's like picking a class of 50 students and saying that this class gets the rank of A, even though the students inside range all the way from A to Z. It's just there's so much um, intricate details that gets missed out when you rank that way. So I was trying to at least plant this seed of thought in my reader's head that maybe think about these other things that all equally, if not matter more when it comes to
Right.
your experience. And here are some places where you can actually try to see which university ranks best in these other areas as well.
Right.
So that was what I was trying to do there.
But what you were also doing was helping others to resist the impulse to what the conventions and the masses are telling you, and to think for yourself. That was an important message in the book.
Yeah, I feel like that message you just said is almost there is an undercurrent of that in every part of the book, which is
Right.
to think for yourself. It's
Right.
okay to say no,
Right.
and really no one else is going to be living your life,
Right.
especially um and I mean I do think I have to say this. In India is such a nucleus family. India is filled with nucleus families. And
Right.
so you are heavily influenced by your immediate family and
Right.
relatives. I was too, and I still am. So it's important to note that while they have the best intention in mind for you,
Mhm.
they are not living your life and they're not
Right.
in your shoes. So what was right or what made sense to them maybe 30 years ago does not make sense right now.
Right.
And I think that's much more common in India than perhaps a country like America, which I've seen to be much more individualistic.
Yes, and that's a fair conclusion, Sundarya. But what I have found in particularly the Asian model is many students crushed under the weight of familial expectations. And you can be whatever you want to be as long as it's a doctor or a lawyer. It's as if you're not even, some don't even have the freedom to decide what they want to do for a living. You became an engineer, which I suspect was met with great enthusiasm, but you also decided to take a different path. So let's change focus here. First, to anyone listening or watching, if you are in the position and you are living in a foreign country and considering coming to the United States, I read the book from the point of view, I'm a born and bred American, educated here, I read it. But as I read the book, even though the book wasn't written for me, I couldn't put it down because I hadn't read a book, not just the content, but the style in which it conveyed helps you to muster the courage to be able to make your decision what is right for you and not necessarily what the rest of the world may be advising. And I think that takes a lot of courage to do it. But Sundarya, now your book is out, and we're going to conclude in a few minutes with where to get the book. But you have done an incredibly wonderful next step that goes beyond writing what it was a wonderful book to be able to bring a different kind of work to the masses in a different way. And you borrowed the concept of what I tend to think about in martial arts, where you think about flow and freedom in water. And when you pour water into a cup, you become the cup. When you pour
Yes.
water into a bottle, the bottle takes the water takes the shape of the bottle. It
Mhm.
goes with what it has been presented and then shows the world in a form that it may not have even tried, but just so naturally became. Talk to our listeners about the concept of a mind like water, what it means to you, and practically what your next evolution involves.
Thank you, Chuck. Um, I Wow, you are so articulate in everything you say. I
I loved your book. So there's no
thank
other
you.
way to put it.
It means so much to me that someone who it was not even aimed for read the book
Right.
and could take away something from it. Thank you.
Indeed.
Um, the course. So the course is really what's consuming me right now,
Right.
not surprisingly.
Yeah.
And the term mind like water, as you said it yourself, it comes from martial arts, but it was used in Getting Things Done by David Allen,
Right.
a very famous book
Yep.
on project management and personal project management.
Yep.
And this went very viral back in 2001 when David published this book, and people started using this methodology and framework to get things done in their lives. So, David describes mind like water as a state in which your mind is unencumbered by distractions and you can focus on what is right in front of you, that you have a clear state of mind, really.
Right.
Um, the Once again, just like with the book, I thought with the course, I wanted to help people build a second brain using digital tools. Back in
Let's
December,
first establish then
yes,
what you have done is created an online learning platform.
yes,
Is that a
exactly.
fair way to express that?
Yes, Mind Like Water is a 4 week long online cohort based course.
Right.
So, cohort based course meaning people would be learning with other people at the same time in
Okay.
live classes. So, throughout the 4 weeks, I'm having 2 live classes every week, and they will be in a community where they can talk to each other outside the live classes and talk to me. And they can book office hours with me and get feedback directly. So, it's an extremely interactive, hands on, personalized experience of learning from anywhere in the world.
But what is it about? And I certainly appreciate the concept. What are you
Yeah.
drawing people in, and what can they expect to learn?
Exactly. So I thought when I wrote the footprints of this idea back in December 2020,
Mhm.
I wanted to create a course that would help people build a second brain in using digital tools. And I know that sounds very vague, so I will describe.
Yeah.
Um, but at least that's the idea that I had back then. As things happen, as I learned more over the past 6, 7 months, now I would say that when someone walks in, let's say that Chuck, for example, you come and take the course, and the people taking this course are people who are working on a lot of great things in life, but they feel like their life is just chaotic, that they're not able to, they don't feel like they have control of their time. And they feel like all the things that's pulling at them from 10 different directions, that is controlling them as opposed to them being intentional of how they want to spend their time. But they all want to do great things. It's just they need some help to bring some order into all this chaos.
Right.
So my goal is when they walk in and then they walk out of the course, when they walk out, number one, their mind is clear. They don't have anything in their mind anymore. They don't have, they don't think about, oh, I have to get this done today. I have to get this done before 2 weeks. It's all out there in a very trusted system. So their mind is used for what it does best, which is creativity, critical thinking, problem solving. Second, all of their goals that they want to achieve in their lives is once again out there in a trusted system. And it's not just offloading what you want to do into a system. I'm also helping people reach balance in all areas in their life. There is something called the life wheel, which has about 8 to 10 quadrants. So it's not just all fire and action where you focus on building a course and building a, publishing a book, but you also focus on other aspects of your life like taking care of yourself, journaling, meditating, forming nurturing relationships with people. So that's my second goal, is to help people achieve more balance than they had when they walked into the course. And finally, the course would be completely on Notion, which is an all-in-one productivity tool that's become very popular now. So when they leave, they will have an extremely robust, personalized workflow in Notion that they can use to plan their weeks and months, years into the future. And I've been experimenting with Notion for 2 years, and I've spent over 150 hours simply experimenting with ideas on how to make this workflow better. So I just want to teach everything that I know through this course.
Yeah. When you look back and you contemplate what was the origin of your journey to the United States to study at Columbia. Did you envision a book and an online learning platform?
I envision becoming a consultant and working at McKinsey, BCG, or Bain at that point.
That would have made a
So
lot of people very happy.
true. Maybe not me, but other people for
No,
sure.
maybe not you. But what did you care? Now you do. You're seeing the world through a different lens. What you wrote was not only personal, Sundarya, you wrote something in the service of so many other people's happiness and success. And I thank you for that.
Thank you. It means so much to me, especially coming from you, a mentor
No,
of mine. Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. And now you shifted gears and you found another medium by which you're now becoming the teacher, and you're using the technology that is an enabler that allows you to bring in others. And here we are again. You're creating an online platform in the service of someone else's success. Sundarya, there's no higher calling. Is this what you thought about a few years ago?
Not at all. Not, and I'm, as you said, every day the past few weeks I have been building the course, and I go to sleep filled with ideas in my head, and the feeling is unparalleled. Just knowing that all of these ideas, which were mere thoughts, are out there into the world right now, and it's hopefully going to positively affect someone's life, and it's a ripple effect. So I had no idea that I would be creating these a few years ago,
Right.
and I have no idea what I'll be doing a few years from now. But
A
I, as
beautiful
of
thing.
now, I'm happy.
Well, there's two questions left. One of them is internal and one of them is external. This may be a more challenging answer, but we don't have an endless amount of time. What, Sundarya, have you learned about yourself through this mountain climb that you have been on for these last few years?
About myself.
About
What have I learned about
yourself, because
myself?
you're in a very different place than you probably thought 3 or 4 years ago.
Um, I have learned that I have increasingly become my biggest champion over the years.
Mhm.
Right now, I talk to myself the way I would talk to my best friend. And I have also continued learning that, once again, no one else sets the timeline for me except for myself. That no one else is walking in my shoes. There's no one else to compare to,
Right.
and that I've just learned to look at things from the lens of gratitude and optimism more and more. I'm not saying I do it every moment of the day, but definitely much more than before.
All right, now let's shift the focus to our listeners. And thank you, as always, for tuning in. It's great to have everyone here. Now let's speak to them. This is your opportunity to answer what is a very cool three-part question that we love on this
Yeah.
show. What do you want the listeners? There is a Sundarya out there, not you. There is a 17-year-old in Kerala or in Mumbai or wherever they may be that is contemplating an odyssey of which you have led them. What do you want them to think? What do you want them to feel about these possibilities? And what do you want them to do?
Um, I simply want them to spend 5 minutes after listening to this podcast
Mhm.
thinking through what they heard and asking themselves if there's any new lens I gave them that they can look at something with. And if so, look at it with that lens and see what that feels like. What I want them to feel, I guess I can't really control that, but I hope they feel like they don't have to carry the burden of other people's expectations on them,
Beautiful.
that you set your own timeline. So
That's great.
even if you feel like you're behind, you're actually not.
Great.
And finally, what I want them to do, well, I my vision is to see everyone who wants to study abroad read Admitted,
Right.
and and also anyone who purchases the book becomes part of a Slack community
Right.
through the virtue of a link inside the book. So it's not just about them reading, but also becoming this part of a community of other readers and talking to me directly. So if anyone listening to this or knows someone who's interested, who's thinking of studying abroad,
Mhm.
I would just say go and read, check out the book on Amazon. It's on Amazon, Google Play, Kindle, and it's also going to be on Holloway, a digital publishing platform in the US soon. And you don't even have to buy it. You can actually just look at the reviews of what other people have said about it and just decide for yourself. You would be investing in yourself by purchasing this book, and you should feel confident in doing that. And reach out to me on LinkedIn, Instagram, via email. I'm on all of these social media platforms if you have any questions.
Yeah. And is there a preferred, just to narrow the choices for some that
Yeah.
wants to get in contact with you directly, what's the best way to do it?
The best way to do it would be to go to LinkedIn, send me a connect request, and add a note in the connect request saying that, hey, I listened to the podcast and have a few questions.
Okay. Soundarya, I wish we had more time, but for the time that we have here to be able to bring Admitted and Mind Like Water to life, I hope I have lived up to your expectations and our capacity to bring this to our audience. But I also want to state what an incredible honor it is to have you here. You're my first student who has come onto A Climb to the Top, and you are my friend, and I value that immensely. And I love what you're doing and watching and hopefully being able to contribute in my own way that I can to your transformation as you strive to continue to help me in mine. And that's what this is about. That's what I felt in Admitted, that none of us are alone, that we are all each other's teachers, and that if we give generously to others, the karma is going to give it right back to us. And that's why I love the book, because this was not a book about checklists. This is a book about building a community that actually cares about each other and looks out for each other. And for that, I can't think of a better way to end this show.
Oh, Chuck, you are one of the best gifts I got from Columbia. Meeting you, having lunch with you, which is a story for another day. But
yeah, that was a fun story. I'm still laughing about that. We owe each other an Italian.
I know, Barcelona. But I just wanted to say to the audience here that I have done many interviews in the past, but this is one of those rare occasions where I feel like you get me more than I get myself. The way you asked me the questions and the way you were so thorough in reading the book, even though you didn't have to, it shows why you have the X factor that most people don't.
Well,
so
go out and read Admitted. It was a wonderful book. Help you to understand the power of developing the mind like water. Have Soundarya be your guide along that. But you have listened to A Climb to the Top, Stories of Transformation. We are available on YouTube, on C-Suite Radio, on Apple, Spotify, on my website. You can go to chuckgarcia.com. Please subscribe to us on YouTube. That's my ask for you for the call to action. You can always reach me on my website at chuckgarcia.com or on LinkedIn, but we are on all the social media platforms. It's been wonderful working and collaborating with Soundarya, which I so immensely enjoy. But to our listeners and to our viewers, thank you as always for coming in each week. We strive to exceed your expectations, and we love hearing from you. So Soundarya, I am putting my hands together and bowing to the divine in you. My only regret is we are not in the same studio together, but what the heck, this Zoom thing is pretty good, so we'll take it. So keep up the wonderful work. I wish you the very best in Mind Like Water, but also in the continued evolution of Admitted. And while I don't know what your next couple years are going to bring, God, I am glad I'm going to be a part of it in some way. So keep doing what you're doing. This has just been wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay,
and thank you to anyone who is listening.
And to ours, good.